Several years back, Indiana's Schrader Real Estate and Auction Company put a 162-acre Kansas farm up for sale, and it blew up online, especially with true crime fans. The reason behind the attention was its dark past. This was the very location where the Bloody Benders carried out their crimes. 150 years earlier in Labette County, Kansas, the Benders operated a crude inn there, offering food and lodging to weary travelers. But this was no ordinary way station. It was a trap. Those who entered lost not only their money, but their lives. No one knows how many people walked into that trap. Only known, the Benders committed a series of brutal, bloody murders there. Victims were bludgeoned with a hammer, their throats slit, their corpses buried in the orchard behind the house. What has proven most haunting is not merely the brutality of their crimes, but the fate of each family member. Just as their crimes were about to be exposed, all four Benders vanished without a trace. For a century and a half, rumors about what became of them have swirled. Some say they fled to the Mexican border. Others swear enraged vigilantes caught and lynched them. Still others believe they returned to their homeland, took new names, and ran another inn, continuing their killings. Following the Civil War, the United States government pushed for people to move west. Labette County, Kansas, sitting along that frontier trail, attracted loads of veterans, civilians, and merchants. In October of 1870, 5 spiritualist families, folks who believed the dead could still be reached through seances, followed suit and settled there too. One of these families was the Benders, made up of Old John, a coarse-haired, thick-set man fond of crude jokes; Elvira, possessed of decent culinary skills yet barely capable of speaking English; John Jr., handsome in appearance with red hair and a full beard, fluent in English though bearing a German accent; Kate, distinguished by her refined manners and striking looks, speaking fluent English with scarcely any detectable accent. They took up 160 acres along the Osage Mission Trail and put up a log cabin, stable, hog pen, a fenced barn, and dug a well. The cabin itself they partitioned with canvas into 2 rooms. The smaller chamber served as their quarters, while the room fronting the road functioned as a combined general store and inn, offering limited quantities of canned goods and fabric, complete with kitchen facilities and dining tables where travelers might take meals or spend the night. North of the cabin was a 2-acre vegetable garden and orchard. In the winter of 1872, George Loncourt left Independence, Kansas, with his infant daughter Mary Ann, traveling by wagon and looking to start fresh in Iowa. But after that, George dropped off the face of the earth. Not a word was heard from him. The following spring, William York, George's longtime neighbor, worried about George and Mary Ann and set out to track George's path. When he reached Fort Scott, York resolved to turn back for Independence, giving up on finding George. But that homeward journey would lead him to the same fate George had met. York drove his wagon forward, and as dark came on, he pulled up at an inn, dead tired. The waitress saw him worn out and claimed she was a healer who could immediately relieve his fatigue. She led him to a table by a canvas curtain. However, hardly had he settled into his chair when a hammer struck his head, rendering him unconscious. This was the Bender family's inn. Before York came in, Old John and John Jr. had hidden behind the curtain, waiting in silence for their opportunity to strike. Once York was out, Elvira, quick as a cat, cut his throat to finish him. Then they took his valuables, opened a trap door, and dropped his body into a secret chamber. For a long time, the Bloody Benders carried out murder after murder in their frenzy of killing. But York had 2 brothers. His elder brother Ed resided in Fort Scott, while his younger brother Alexander was a Civil War veteran, lawyer, and member of the Kansas State Senate from Independence. Both Ed and Alexander were aware of York's itinerary. When they learned that York had not returned home, Alexander leading a company of some 50 men and set out along York's return route. Inquiring ceaselessly for news of him, questioned every traveler they encountered along the way, asking whether anyone had seen York. On March 28th, Alexander arrived at the Bender family inn. He explained his purpose and asked whether they had seen his brother. The Old John and Kate admitted that York had indeed come through, Yet in their words, they repeatedly insinuated to Alexander that York had become involved in a conflict with Indians. That was their first meeting. On April 3rd, Alexander returned to the Bender family inn with his armed party. This time, Alexander had heard that a woman, having been threatened at knife point by Elvira, had fled the inn. Upon Alexander's inquiry, John Jr. and Kate hastily denied the matter, claiming that their mother scarcely understood English and could not possibly have quarreled with anyone. However, when Alexander raised the matter again, Elvira suddenly flew into a rage. She denounced the woman as a witch who had cursed her coffee and demanded that Alexander and his armed men get out. At that time, Kate seemed to realize that their crime was about to be exposed, so she wanted to delay the time. She told Alexander that she needed him to come back alone next Friday and promised that she would use her medium ability to help him find York. The armed men believed the Benders to be the perpetrators of York's disappearance and were eager to hang them on the spot. But as a state senator, Alexander wanted finding evidence first. After leaving the inn, the local community convened a meeting to discuss York's disappearance, and they ultimately decided to apply for a search warrant to examine all inns in the area. 3 days following the meeting, a man named Billy, while driving cattle past the Bender Inn, found that the inn's door stood open and that the livestock on the farm had gone unfed for several days. Billy then sent a letter to local officials, but severe weather delayed its delivery. Once conditions improved and the officials received the letter, they hurriedly gathered men to form a search party. Alexander was among them. When they reached the Bender family inn, they found it utterly deserted. Food, clothing, and valuables had been swept clean away. During the search of the inn, the members of the search party found a stench in the inn. Following the scent, they located a trapdoor in the floor, only to find it nailed shut. Once they pried it open, they found a secret chamber with its floor covered in pooled blood. Suspecting the presence of human remains, they swung sledgehammers and shattered the floorboards. Though no remains were found within, the smell of blood confirmed their suspicions. So the search party members proceeded to probe the grounds surrounding the cabin with metal rods, focusing their investigation particularly upon the vegetable garden and orchard. That same evening, York's body was found. He lay face down in the earth, buried so shallowly that his feet nearly protruded from the ground. The search continued until midnight, during which the party marked 9 additional suspected grave sites. The following morning, they exhumed 8 more remains from 7 of these locations and retrieved another one from the well. They also found the body of a young girl who had been buried alive and suffocated to death. Within the inn, the searchers also recovered a Roman Catholic prayer book containing German notations, which recorded, Johanna Bender, born July 30th, 1848, and John Gebhardt arrived in America July 18th. Additionally, the flyleaf of an old Bible bore the inscriptions, Big Slaughter Day, Jan 8th, and Hell Departed. Later, some who knew the Benders told a different story. Old John was a repulsive, hideous brute, without a redeeming trait, dirty, profane, and ill-tempered. Elvira was a dirty old Dutch crone. Her face was a fit picture of the midnight hag that wove the spell murderous ambition about the soul of Macbeth. John Jr., seen when excited, recalled the grave-rotting hyena at once to mind. Kate, professing herself a spiritualist medium, publicly declared that murder might be committed in the service of good. She advocated free love, lay with her younger brother John, and defended it. Should we confine ourselves to a single love and deny nature its due, even when that due is passion between brother and sister? From these discoveries, it appeared that the Benders was likely not a genuine family unit at all. Subsequent investigation further revealed that Elvira and Kate may have been the only true blood relations. Some researchers further claim that Kate maintained sexual relations with both Old John and John Jr., so this twisted family structure may well have constituted the psychological foundation for their remarkably tight-knit criminal collaboration. Based upon this information, it may be inferred that the Benders chose to pose as a family because, in those days, a family unit could more readily earn the trust of strangers than single individuals or loosely associated pairs. Later, a Kansas newspaper reported that upon the discovery of the victims' corpses, local residents were seized with fury. Brockman, a friend of the Benders, was hanged from a beam in the inn until unconscious. Senator Alexander posted a reward of $1,000 for the apprehension of the Benders, and Kansas Governor Thomas increased the bounty to $2,000, dead or alive. According to reconstruction, the Benders' method of murder proceeded as follows. When guests stayed overnight at the inn, members of the Benders would arrange for them to sit in a special honored seat. Once the guest sat with his back to the canvas curtain, Kate would engage him in conversation to divert his attention. And then, the old John or John Jr. would emerge from behind the curtain and strike the guest's head violently with a hammer. Immediately thereafter, Elvira would cut the victim's throat to ensure death, and the body would be dropped through the trapdoor into the secret chamber. Having completed these steps, they would plunder the victim's valuables and bury the corpse somewhere. The testimony of several survivors who had narrowly escaped from the Bender Inn corroborated this method of killing. William Pickering stated that when he refused to sit in the seat, Kate drew a knife and threatened him to comply. Fortunately, he managed to seize an opportunity and flee. A Catholic priest named Paul claimed that he had seen one of the Bender men holding a hammer, which filled him with unease, prompting him to fabricate an excuse and depart the inn. There are many different versions of the story regarding the Benders' ultimate fate. Some claim that days after their flight, they went to an outlaw colony situated on the border between Texas and New Mexico. No one dared enter to search for them or verify this information, for law enforcement officers who ventured into such places rarely returned alive. Others claim that an officer pursued them to the Mexican border and found that John Jr. had died of a stroke, and the old John and Elvira had not disembarked at Humboldt, but instead purchased tickets to St. Louis, Missouri. Still others held that the Benders hadn't gotten away at all, that angry vigilantes caught them, shot 3, and burned Kate alive, or that vigilantes killed them and threw them in the river. But no one has ever received a reward of $3,000. In those days, if someone really killed Benders, why didn't they go to receive the prize? Later, near the town of Oak in the neutral lands of Kansas, there appeared a family called the Kellys, likewise 4 in number, who imitated the Bender family's method of killing. They also seated their victims upon chairs positioned over trapdoors, triggering the mechanism during conversation to send the victims plummeting into a basement where they were killed. Although the Benders Inn had long since been demolished, a small sign still stands at that location recounting the story of the Bloody Benders. The sign concludes with these words, "The end of the Benders is not known. The earth seemed to swallow them, as it had their victims."